Southeast Radio's Business Matters with Karl Fitzpatrick.
Well, when Anne Abberton established her business, FiXX Coffee, she was a trailblazer in the industry. As Ireland's first female coffee business owner, Anne also introduced Cuban coffee to the Irish consumer. 20 years on, not only has FiXX Coffee extended its product range, but the popular coffee culture in Ireland now means that the business continues to go from strength to strength. Anne joins us now to tell us about her success story and some of the emerging trends in the industry. And you are still the only female coffee business owner in Ireland. But before we discuss FiXX Coffee, I'd like to hear about the time you spent overseas working in the travel industry, as it was this experience that provided you with valuable insights for your future business.
Thank you, Karl. Good morning to you and your listeners. I spent probably the guts of 10 to 12 years overseas working for a tour operator called Thompson Holidays. They're now known as TUI. And basically part of my job was to go and seek out new destinations for your holidaymaker to travel to. So I spent some time in places like Portugal, France, Spain, parts of Africa, and then the majority of my time was in the States. And during that time, I found that an awful lot of my, working connections and my business meetings took place over coffee. You know, so it was part of when you were doing a business deal, you sat down and had a coffee, and it was part of just about everything that I was doing. So, yeah, that was something that was, I suppose, highlighted to me very early on.
And it was in 2003 that over a coffee with the then Cuban ambassador to Ireland and the owner of a cigar business in Dublin, the idea for the business was actually born.
Yeah, pretty much so. So once I had finished working overseas, I came back to Ireland in 97, and I was working for a hotel chain, the Doyle Hotel Group here in Dublin. And part of my remit, Karl, was to look after the diplomatic business. So a new Cuban embassy opened, and the ambassador was a female, Teresita, and she was very keen to, I suppose, improve trade between Ireland and Cuba. So she was friendly with a gentleman called Guy Hancock, whom I also knew, and Guy was doing business already with Cuba with cigars. She wanted to do more trade, and coffee was one of these things. At the same time, simultaneously in my own business, in the hotel business, there was a buyout taking place between Juries Doyle and the Doyle Hotel Group. So I saw that as an opportunity probably to move on myself. And yeah, that was kind of where the seed grew from. And I remembered what coffee was like overseas, and I hadn't been exposed to that here in Ireland. So I saw an opportunity that, yeah, maybe Ireland could become more of a coffee culture type of country.
And take us back to 2003 from a coffee culture perspective in Ireland. Back then, were you seeing people walking down the street with a coffee cup in their hand?
No, I mean, God, the landscape was completely different to what it is now. I mean, our business is 20 years old. Well, I do remember doing research and looking at what was being consumed. And on the shelves in many of the stores, it was mainly instant coffee. And it accounted for almost 90% of the coffee that was being consumed. And then about 10% was ground coffee and beans. And I remember thinking to myself, well, guess what? That leaves a huge opportunity to turn that on its head. And if we could get more people drinking beans and filter like I had seen elsewhere overseas, surely that could be the essence of a business.
So once you had that opportunity identified, talk to us about the steps which followed.
Yeah. So I suppose I didn't really know anything more than, about coffee than the fact that I liked drinking it. I liked the culture around it. I liked the connections. But of course, in order to sell anything or to set up a business, you need to know your product and you need to know it inside out. So I went on a hunt to try and find out who can educate me in the space of coffee. I hadn't even seen what a coffee tree looked like, let alone know, much more about the business itself, the coffee business. So I set off to educate myself, and I found the London School of Coffee was just about to open back in that 2004. So I made friends with the guys that were setting it up, basically, and I offered my services kind of free of charge if they could help me and educate me as much as they could in this space. The only other schools that were really doing coffee at that time, Karl, were a school in Seattle with Starbucks, and also, in Italy, Italy was the only other school that was providing education. So, it was a good timing in my time there, and we got set up and got education taking place over those 6 months. Yeah.
So initially, why did you decide that Cuban coffee was the product that you wanted your business to sell?
So Cuban coffee was not being exported to Ireland or to the UK or to lots of parts of Europe at the time. And Teresita, when she had set up the Cuban embassy here in Ireland, she had been looking for Cuban products for her event, and Cuban coffee was one of them. And I couldn't find it at the time when I was in the hotel business. We could only get it in Germany. So I thought, okay, there's an opportunity here. And if we could find and get exclusive rights just for Cuban coffee for two markets like Ireland and the UK, surely we had the essence of something that would create a good business. Nobody else was doing it, so I had something that nobody else had. I had exclusive rights for two markets and pretty big markets as well. And it was a premium product. And so in that respect, it was, not that easy to come across. So I could put probably a premium price on it, and I could probably, work about it in a way that it was a real treat. So I liked that. I had been working in 5-star hotels. I liked that market.
Now, the business today sources its coffee from worldwide locations. So why did you decide to broaden the scope, and what are your most popular products now?
Okay, so when we set up the business originally, we were just like we were talking about there, supplying or sourcing just directly from Cuba. And then what happened in maybe 3 years into the business itself, we had a piece of bad luck whereby really bad weathers in Cuba, hurricanes, etc., destroyed the crop on us. So here I had a company that was just doing Cuban coffee, and now I had no Cuban coffee to sell. So that was a challenging time. And we went back to our customers and we said, hey, listen, I've got a situation here whereby I can no longer source 100% Cuban coffee. Would you still work with me if I got coffee from elsewhere? And the answer was a resounding, yes, of course we'll buy coffee from you. So I was very lucky. And that was why I, broadened the net. And that's why I started looking elsewhere. And I learned the lesson, Karl, that you don't put all your eggs in one basket, which is what I had done. I put all my eggs in one basket by just doing Cuban coffee. So now I have learned and I have spread the net widely, and we buy a lot in from Brazil and from Colombia, Ethiopia, Peru, all over.
So what else have you learned then when it comes to actually sourcing new coffee products? What are your primary considerations there?
Taste definitely is a huge factor. So it has to taste good. The quality has to be good. Supply has to be, easy, so that if I am offering something that I can continue to do so. Price comes into it, but it's mainly quality, it's mainly supply, and it's mainly, where we already have a direct connection with the people that we're buying from.
And does the consumer place much emphasis on the coffee being ethically sourced today?
Probably not as much as I'd like them to. We actually conducted a survey there back in September time, where we asked 1,000 people in Ireland what they thought about, sustainably sourced coffee and would they pay more for it. And what we found was that 8% will definitely pay more to ensure that they're buying ethical coffee. 34% were somewhere, willing to pay a little bit more. But the majority of people were indifferent. So I think there's a huge opportunity there for coffee suppliers like ourselves to change that dial. Again, a bit like when I first started out, changing the dial from instant coffee to other types of coffee. But so there's a huge opportunity to, I suppose, educate customers around ethical coffee and why we need to be buying sustainable coffee. It's so that we can future-proof the supply, really.
And talk to us about the EU's proposals to ban the import of coffee beans that are linked to areas of deforestation.
Yeah, so this is a new regulation that's coming down the tracks in Europe. It was supposed to come into regulation in September of this year, but a lot of the bodies involved weren't ready, so it has been postponed to towards the end of next year. And really what it is, it's asking coffee suppliers in Europe not to import coffee that comes from any area that deforestation has taken place. So this takes an awful lot of planning, and it takes an awful lot of administration and geo-mapping and everything. It's a really good idea, but it does take time to actually get all this in place, because we're dealing, a lot of the time we're dealing with little tiny, farmholes that are only about 4 hectares or 3 acres in size. They're small, and they don't necessarily have the resources to do what is needed here. So it'll take a little bit of time, but it's a good idea in theory. We just need to all work together. And Europe as an importer, it imports the most coffee per capita outside of the States and outside of, Asia, etc. So we got to be mindful that if we are asking coffee suppliers to do this or coffee farmers to do this, that we support them in doing it as well, you know.
And of course, there are lots of emerging trends in the coffee space. Some of them include specialty and functional coffees, iced and cold brew coffees, and of course, decaffeinated options as well. What are your thoughts on those?
Yeah, I mean, there's room for all sorts, really, to be honest with you. I mean, decaf has definitely come on leaps and bounds. It's probably our third best seller, actually. You know, and the methods in creating decaf coffee has improved considerably over the last number of years, especially in the last 10 years. So, yeah, I'm always happy to see it on there because not everybody can tolerate caffeine or want to either. So they have to have a nice, good tasting alternative. Cold brew is certainly coming down the tracks and definitely getting more popular, as is iced coffee, because iced coffee used to be just something in the summer. It's an all year round trend now, and that's mostly the younger generation, people in their 20s or whatever, seem to be consuming it all year round. But they're all popular, and anything that gets people consuming coffee obviously makes us happy, that's for sure.
And when it comes to the attitude towards coffee, how have you seen that change in recent years?
I suppose what I've seen is what I probably witnessed overseas. So I see a greater coffee culture here in Ireland at this time. So people are going out and about socialising around coffee a lot more than they would have done. Like again, back in, you know, that survey that I referenced that we did back in September time, we found that one of the questions we posed is, you know, do you socialise around coffee or do you socialise around alcohol? And coffee came in at 48% and alcohol came in at 52%. So that's a big change. The other thing we noticed as well is just consumption at home. And the different brewing methods that people are using, from capsule machines to, you know, grinders to various different brewing equipment. But there's a huge change in that as well.
And the International Coffee Organization has reported that coffee prices surged by almost 20% in the third quarter of this year. But what are the reasons for such substantial price increases, Anne?
A combination, I guess, of poor harvests, especially in Brazil this year, and Brazil provides 60% of the coffee worldwide pretty much. Climate change is certainly a factor that's contributing to the increase in pricing. The war in Ukraine, inevitably, and conflict in the Red Sea. Then you've intervention of speculators all the time, and there's been a very strong dollar as well in the last 12 months or so. And we trade in dollars when we're trading coffee. It's always bought in dollars. So it's like the perfect storm.
And finally, Anne, after 20 successful years in business, what are the future growth plans for FiXX Coffee?
For us, we've seen significant, potential in our online business and our subscription model, where there's repeat buying taking place. We've seen double-digit growth in that in 2024 this year. We'll also continue to collaborate with, our wholesale partners here in Ireland, on the island of Ireland. And then I suppose beyond Ireland, we're exploring opportunities to partner with, distributors to include our range of retail bags and product lines, to add it to their own portfolio, really. So, yeah, we see the future is bright still, that's for sure. Even after 20 years, we're very lucky.
Well, if you've just tuned in, that was Anne Abberton from FiXX Coffee. And I'd like to thank Anne for sharing her business journey with us this morning.
Southeast Radio's Business Matters with Karl Fitzpatrick.